And another one, Dr. Manny Sinai, Paul Ramsey. Here we are.
Fun. These are cool, right? These are just
You know,
good.
I like the live feel a lot. I like the engagement. I appreciate the audience. Um, and it feels more in the zone.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, what you got for me tonight, dude?
Tonight tonight, whenever you're watching this, I suppose depends. We're gonna talk about the actual experience of being hypnotized. So, and the reason that I wanted to focus on that in this particular episode is, we've already talked about how important expectation is to people's hypnotic experience, to being, even just being able to be hypnotized, and a significant portion of that expectation is built around what they think it should be like.
Okay.
What they've heard that it should be like, what they assume it should be like. And this is again where this is a recurrent theme. Expectation is really important to really understand and get your head around how it impacts people's hypnotic experiences, because it's the kind of thing where I've had people many times be hypnotized for an hour, hour and a half, be basically the stars of a stage show, or do really incredibly well in a client session, and at the end of it, they honestly believe they weren't hypnotized. And that can be sort of damaging to either their perception of it being a positive experience, right? Because they just think, I don't think I was hypnotized. Or to their prospect for creating positive change, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes if they feel like they didn't get hypnotized, whatever work you did with them sort of gets thrown out, because they're just like, it didn't really work for me, and they don't fully incorporate the work that was done during the session. So getting people to get a sense of what the experience can be like, I think, is important.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to do, and we hadn't discussed this, so feel free to throw me and my squirrel away. What's it not like? Because a lot of people, I have to explain. Well, I like to explain to them what mindfulness is not like. Mindfulness is not levitating. Mindfulness necessarily. Mindfulness is not disappearing from the world. What's hypnosis not like?
It is not like being passed out and unconscious, which a lot of people expect. A lot of people expect that it's as if you will go, because we use the word sleep a lot. A lot of people expect that it will be as if you went to sleep and then you wake up later. It's not like that. It's a conscious state. It's an awake state. And it is not like going to another dimension. Like sometimes I think people expect it to be this really big mystical experience. Like they're gonna time warp someplace or something like that. And it's not like that either. It's not. I mean, it can be profound. It can be profound, and it can be surprising, and it can be a lot of things. But I think the big thing that people get hung up on is they expect it to either be an unconscious experience somehow, or they expect it to be this really kind of crazy, like I went to an alternate universe type of experience, and it's not like that.
Sorry, wrong party.
Sorry.
Wrong party. Yeah. So I guess that, in semiotics, we often say we are as much defined by what we're not as by what we are. So I wanted to kind of
I appreciate that.
Don't expect any of this. So with an open mind at this point, what can we expect?
First, basic things that you should expect if you're going to get hypnotized. You should expect to continue hearing noises from the world around you, since you will remain conscious. You should expect to continue to have your own conscious thought process. And that's, again, a lot of people seem to have an expectation that all of that will stop, and because they're in state and they're still sort of ruminating, they're like, well, this must not be working. Here I am thinking to myself, that can't be right, and sometimes then what happens is just bringing your attention to that and away from whatever the operator is doing with you does ruin it for you, and you're not hypnotized. You lose the focus in the early stages sometimes. So it's important to understand you're still going to be awake. You're going to be aware. You're going to be aware of yourself physically. You're going to be aware of your own thoughts. Sometimes, because hypnosis increases focus, you will actually sometimes become hyper aware of yourself physically. It's very common for people to report feeling their heart pounding in their chest. And it's not so much that their heart is pounding, it's that the rest of the day you're not paying attention to that. And now when you get into this focused state, you notice the tickles, you notice the breeze, you notice one stray eyebrow hair maybe moving or flutter. You know, like you start to get really, really focused, and you notice those kinds of things. So that's not uncommon. I think it's also, I always tell people, in an effort to help them recognize the experience if it's there and then not dwell on it, be kind of like, okay, we can move on, is I always tell people, you may notice your hands and fingers get really tingly, almost like when they're asleep and then they're coming out of it, you know. I don't know why. It may be out there, but I've never read an explanation for why. It's something that I've learned over the years, over and over and over again, especially first-timers. They report getting this sort of numb or tingly feeling in their hands, and a lot of times it goes away, but they have it at first, and it's one of those things that can be distracting. There's a tendency for people when they get into hypnosis for increased lacrimation. You'll see people get real watery. When their eyes are open, they'll have water all along the lower lid, and sometimes they'll get to a point where it will pool up enough that finally it spills over and a single tear will run down their face. They're not crying, they just have a little increased lacrimation.
That's parasympathetic system kicking in.
Yeah?
Yeah. Like one thing I think of is like, and this is geekerific for my fellow neuro geeks. We did a series on this, the How Does My Brain Work series a while back. The default mode network.
Yep.
Yeah, and when my brain is doing things, I like to think of I visualize the part sparking off, because that's how I geek. But when you had mentioned becoming more aware of your heartbeat, there are certain networks that handle that. It's no longer in vogue in learned circles to think of your brain as this big lump of mush. There are electronic circuits firing off, doing the things. So
yeah.
Maybe
you tell me, Manny, if this is parasympathetic as well, but I've noticed a fair amount of people, their circulation changes.
Mm-hmm.
Their circulation will change and the blood will come up into the capillary level, so they'll get real rosy in the face.
Yeah.
They'll get blotchy. When I'm doing shows, you see it more with women, because women tend to be a little more likely to wear sleeveless shirts. You see blotchy on the arms, and women wearing lower cut shirts, you'll see blotchy on the chest and real red in the face. And the other cool thing that you can see, it's really neat to observe, is, you know, because you've got all these fine capillaries in your eyes, their eyes won't get bloodshot. It's so even, the distribution, their eyes will turn pink.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would call that parasympathetic as well, because if you hear the poop out of someone, they go pale, they blanch.
Right.
Fight pulls all your blood away from your peripheral organs, so that you can like sprint. It goes to heart, and the vessels like tighten up on epinephrine and sprint. But the opposite would be kind of spacing out to your body. So I would imagine it's a relaxation parasympathetic benefit.
Yeah, and it's really profound. I mean, and it's I find that with guys, when I'm doing stage shows, I'll walk the chair line, and I'm watching for things, but I also do a little bit of feeling. So what I'll do is I'll place my hand on their shoulder, and when I place my hand on their shoulder, with guys, if they've got the heat is just radiating off of them like they've got a fever. I mean, just blazing hot. And the other thing that you can do is I've learned to, when I put my hand on their shoulder, I put my thumb so that the thumb goes on the carotid, and you can feel the heartbeat. And a lot of times their heartbeat will pick up initially, and then it'll settle down. Sometimes it picks up so much that you don't even have to feel for it. You can just look and you can see it pulp, boom, 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 boom. It's really
venous distension.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some stuff like that that, you know, and again, so like as an operator, I can observe those things and check for those things. As the subject, people can also self-observe those things. They can feel the heartbeat increase, they can feel the body heat, they can feel their eyes getting watery. You know, these are things that can be self-observed as well. The question, I think, is do they notice them and make note of them? Sometimes they're so focused on my voice, we work down the path together, right? And they're so focused on my voice and what I'm talking about that they don't notice these things, and they don't have a way at that time to go, hey, that's different. Something has changed. I must be doing good with this whole hypnosis thing. They just don't do that. So.
And as far as I had a question I jotted earlier because I wanted to ask you. Are there different stages during the process?
Different stages of hypnosis?
Yeah, well, yeah, the different stages, and are there different stages, and do they feel different? I guess was my anchor question.
Well, we're going to do a follow-up on depth, and we'll talk about that to some extent when we talk about depth. If you ask me about stages, I would say process-wise, you have induction, and we're talking about heterohypnosis in this particular case. Like if I'm working with someone, I'm going to do an induction that's going to help lead them into state. Once I get them into state, I'm going to deepen that state and help them get a little deeper into hypnosis. And then we're going to move to what we call utilization, and that's the working state. So, nothing necessarily, when you get to the utilization stage, it's not like the hypnosis itself changes. It's just that you've gotten them to a place where you feel comfortable that they're focused enough and more receptive so that you're like, okay, I can start getting stuff done now. And so it's more for the operator's sort of timeline.
Okay.
To say, okay, I'm ready for utilization. Then you're giving suggestions, you're getting change work done, or you're getting entertainment things done on stage. And then when you're ready to be done, then you're going to emerge, and you're going to use a technique to emerge them from hypnosis.
Okay.
So that's sort of like stages for me as an operator. As a subject, I think it tends to be more practically like you're in or you're not. You're in state or you're not. And with maybe a little bit of like, if you want to go further than that, you can say you're in. How deep do you go in? You know, can you get a sense of, and you can, when you do hypnosis enough, Manny, you get a sense of that. Okay. You get a sense of like, no, I'm just kind of light because I'm used to feeling this way, to no, now I know I'm deep because I'm so relaxed, I can't move my body.
Okay.
Now, you really could move your body if you had to, but it would disturb the tranquility that you've achieved. So the perception at the moment is I feel so relaxed that I don't think I could move. And this is the very first time I ever did hypnosis. I did it with a cassette, and I was laying on my bed, and I was like, this is nice. I was like, this is nice. And then I'm going on and listening. And then I got to this point where I thought to myself, I feel so relaxed, I don't think I can move.
Yeah.
And in my head, I tried to lift my arm, and my arm wouldn't move. And I thought, well, isn't that something? I didn't get scared or anything. You're just so peaceful, and you're so relaxed and positive that that's okay. Now, if the fire alarm went off, you'd go, I need to move, and everything would change. You'd recontextualize the experience, and you'd come up, and if we're talking about depth, you'd kind of come up into the shallower, and you'd emerge, and you'd be able to move. But I think there's a sense of, does that make sense? That kind of like, you, again, sort of your definition of how deep you are can be yours, kind of.
Yeah. Now, what I like about what you explained there is specifically, and I brought this up the other day, in patients with obsessive compulsive disorder, you have thought-action fusion. Okay, where the person, they feel as if the thought is connected to the action, and they get really nervous. I thought about it, and I'm going to do it. It's also in some cases, like in some psychotic patients, called magical thinking, where they feel bad because they thought about hurting someone. And You have all the negative emotions associated with it, and they have the full physiological cascade. Now, what you described is basically relaxing to the point where you're able to perceive the action intention and the actual firing of the motor component. Yeah, and to me that's
Oh, okay.
yeah, like because I like explaining to people that when you get calm to a certain point, you could navigate between realizing that something made you angry and the actual physiological cascade of epi, blood rushing to your head, seeing red, or whatever other manifestation.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a powerful point that you get there, you're like, I don't think I could move. Let me try. And you fire off part of the motor command sequence. You're like,
Yeah. And that's really, I think, I mean, now this is one of those things where we could go deeper and deeper with this, and it takes us back to the idea of suggestion, right? That the very act of saying that internally is like giving yourself a suggestion. I don't think I can move. You've sort of defined the outcome right then and there. You've given that suggestion, and then you can't move. I mean, it's a pretty, I don't want to say crazy. It's very fascinating. It's an interesting thing, um, and and then we go back to almost like what you were talking about with default mode network stuff of like you can put yourself in, you can do self hypnosis and put yourself in state and just sit there, very much like meditation. Just sort of sit there, be in default, and see what happens.
and,
Just
and heal. That's why
yeah, yeah.
it.
And the only thing that can be a little bit tricky about that, I think, is much like you've mentioned this before about meditation and mindfulness practice, that people aren't always ready for what will come from that, and you
Yeah,
may be a little jolted or shocked
yeah,
by what comes up. And I've had that happen in shows before. I've had people who very genuinely want to be hypnotized and want to have that experience, but they've had a lot of repressed stress that they haven't been dealing with, and so they get into state, and they take away that conscious mechanism of repression of like, I'll deal with it later, I'll deal with it later, I don't want to think about it now.
yeah,
And the subconscious is like, it'd be great if we could just vent this out and get it off. And next thing you know, they're relaxing, they're peaceful, everything's going like this, and then they just start crying.
yeah,
And then they start breathing hard and working toward hyperventilating. And luckily I know how to recognize that stuff, and I know if we don't snip it right then and there, it's going to go to full-on hysteria where they're going to be just pouring out all that negative energy and crying and sobbing, and so step right in, and we end the trance for those folks and get them out of that environment so that they don't have a big scary episode in front of everything. And it's not that they couldn't come to harm, it just would freak everybody in the room out to witness that happen, and it's not the appropriate place. So we get them out of hypnosis, and I explain to them afterward what happened, and I say, you might, and again, since I'm not a counselor, I'll say, I make a referral basically. I'll say, you might want to go visit someone and talk about whatever stress you had going on, or do a little bit of talking with someone and work on that, because your subconscious is trying to tell you, we need to get rid of this.
yeah. And to put the sort of the brass tacks on what's going on there, when people have a traumatic event, at a certain point, when your brain is not able to deal with it, you dissociate. And dissociation, I think I mentioned this in one of our How Does My Brain Work videos. You get this glucocorticoid, like a steroid cascade between your frontal lobe and your hippocampus and your amygdala. It's like shh. And now your amygdala is firing on autopilot. Your hippocampus, which is the part that encodes the memories, isn't encoding this stuff as self-related memories anymore. It's happening, but not to me. And then, but subconsciously, next time you're around those cues, subconsciously, your subconscious mind is like, hey, it's time to be scared. And but it's not labeled as a memory for you. So all of a sudden you have this wave of fear. And because of the way our brains work, you're going to throw it on something. You'll be like, oh, I'm afraid of him.
Yeah.
That's the difference between our implicit, sort of our tacit memories, like skills, and self-encoded memories.
Yeah. Wow.
Neuro geek moment there. I'm better now. Yeah, I tend to like, my brain does this weird thing where the way I keep data in is when something anchors to it, I kind of pull it back, refresh it, and then put it back in with that other data so I'll actually remember.
Sure. Sure.
Good therapy
That's cool.
mechanism too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if folks who are watching live right now, if they have other questions about, what they've heard about what the hypnotic experience is like, or if they've just wondered things on their own. But we can take some of those questions and talk more about that if they want. Do you have any other questions, Manny, about it?
Um, Not that I could think of, which is weird for me.
Yeah.
Usually I'll come up with a for you, but I can't think of any right now.
I mean, there's a lot of, I think the big thing that I would want people to take away from this particular video session is there is not some cookie cutter hypnosis experience that you should expect to have. That's one of the big things that I just want to sort of confront. It's really, there's some diversity to the experience, and it all depends on, again, what's the context. Are you in an office with a consulting hypnotist, or are you on a stage? The energy in those two settings is completely different. Are you going to be in a show and have fun and get jazzed up, or are you sitting quietly at home doing self-hypnosis to relax? There's so many different factors of why you're doing hypnosis and what you're hoping to achieve with hypnosis, and those things affect the experience. I mean, we can even go to, after the last video session, someone had made a comment, I think it was Ammon, had made a comment about how overwhelmingly hypnosis is based on relaxation.
Yeah.
And in most consulting office settings and even stage settings, that's true, but it's important to understand that there are ways to get people into hypnosis that are not relaxing at all. There are confusion inductions,
Yeah,
there are shock inductions, and we're going to do an episode on inductions, and we can talk about that a little bit. But again, so I mean, you can even think about the possibilities there, that like you can get sort of like flipping a switch, like you can get switched into hypnosis very quickly and abruptly using certain techniques, and relaxation has nothing to do with those techniques at all. So there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it okay for me to throw the word triggers in there, just for people to kind of think about?
Yeah. Why are you thinking of that? Tell me more.
Because one of the concepts that I'm familiar with patients who had like rape and PTSD, and people who like,
Uh-oh. Did I lose you? Did you lose?
yeah, certain combinations of things take them back to that place. And to me, the triggers kick scripts like schema in the plural, but they kick, and it's like, because your cognition is pattern matching. And so if someone is scared and like in a hypnotic, into a hypnotic trance, then they match patterns more erratically and erroneously as well. And then later on, you've got memories that don't fit the trigger, that are overreactive because of the fight or flight response.
Right.
Right.
So again, that's so great. So there's like multiple angles there, because now you're talking about the idea that triggers can occur environmentally and take people into trance states with no formal induction,
Yep.
no formal process at all, but they can go right to that place. They can revivify memories, kick off these cascades that you were talking about earlier, and that can be as simple as just the other day I had this. I smelled something the other day, and I immediately had a whole memory movie play in my mind because of the smell. I can't think of what it was right now, but it was the coolest thing. And I mean, it was trance, like smell. Yeah. Never mind what's going on in the external world. I totally went internal and was completely focused on the memory and the imagery, like I may as well have been watching TV inside my head. It was amazing.
Now, I'll take you one level further. Some people, when you trigger them, they go into the full hypnosis where, as I mentioned, memories that are encoded a certain way, you can have a memory that is just the emotions, and by not having the self component, and people who are married can understand this. Sometimes you're in the middle of an argument and you're saying stuff and you're like, you should probably just shut up now. This would be the time to shut up. You know, you really don't have a reason to be angry anymore, but it appears your anger memory is still activating, and I wonder if the couch will be as fluffy today as it was last week. A lot of times we walk around, and if you trigger the right schema, you see stuff that is not there. And we're used to it being, well, I got angry and you didn't mean that. But it can be triggered to the extent that, like, I had a patient who he had like typical war PTSD, and he would wake up in the middle of the night and like hop behind like to the foot of the bed, and he had an axe in his house, which I always wondered why, but he would get to swing in this axe. And one day his neighbor thought it would be clever to hop up and startle him, and got like a military type whoop down.
Yeah.
You know? And he'll tell you when people have those flashbulb memories come back, the memory overlays in the context. They see you, but when they're looking around, they are seeing the war taking place. The sound triggered, right. The explosion triggered a set of visual memories that they don't perceive as memories. They're there now, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's important to think about memories as more than just I remember. Every time you're moving your arm, you're activating a memory.
Right.
Yeah. When you break a sweat, it's because you remember how to sweat. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. I guess we should look at the questions.
We've got a bunch of people are making comments and stuff, but no one seems to really have any questions today. So I think we can wrap it up. Really.
Awesome.
Yeah. So so we've covered sort of the basic definition of hypnosis, and then we talked about who can be hypnotized. Mm-hmm. Now we've talked about the experience itself. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do next time is actually start talking about inductions, because today you asked me about sort of the stages and the process, and we sort of laid that out. Next time we can talk about actually how do you induce hypnosis, and we'll talk about some different ways to do that, and we'll kind of keep it going from there. Does that sound cool?
That sounds really good to me.
All right, that's what we're going to do next time then. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it. Dr. Vanny Cyanide.
I'm Paul Ramsey.
See y'all tomorrow or next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.